Now out in cinemas is Christopher Nolan's latest epic, The Odyssey, based on the 3,000-year-old Greek poem by Homer. Produced for $250 million, filming took place from February to August of 2025 in Morocco, Greece, Italy, Scotland, Iceland, Western Sahara, Malta and Los Angeles. The Odyssey is the most expensive film of Nolan's career and the first to be shot entirely on IMAX's 70mm film cameras. Christopher Nolan began writing the script in March of 2024 and studied several translations of the Odyssey. He wanted to depict a realistic interpretation of Greek mythology. He explained that he chose to adapt the Odyssey because it had not been adapted in a large-scale production from a major Hollywood studio, calling it an odd gap in movie history. Nolan described the Odyssey as foundational because it incorporates aspects of the horror, mystery, romance and thriller genres of stories. Nolan wanted to take Homer's epic story and make it accessible to modern audiences with its language and its themes. On the one hand, making the audience feel the story is ancient, and the other very relevant. Christopher Nolan had been using the IMAX format since The Dark Knight, but mostly for select scenes, as they were too noisy to record dialogue, and wanting to shoot the Odyssey entirely in the large format, they would need to think of a way to reduce the noise. They developed lighter cameras, but also they were concealed in large sound blimps on set. It ends up making the camera looking like one of the robots from Star Wars. As a single IMAX camera can only hold roughly 3 minutes of film, actors had to pause during longer scenes while the camera was reloaded before resuming their performances. The press reviews so far have been highly positive, with The Guardian awarding it 5 out of 5, calling it a film with thrilling ambition, boldness, seriousness, generosity and flair. The LA Times called it a mighty Trojan horse of Nolan's thematic obsessions, writing that Nolan refuses to tremble before the canon. He cuts and rejiggers Homer and a bit of Virgil to transform the classic text into his type of tale, one fixated on memory, self-identity, destructive genius, and the slippage of time. The Hollywood Reporter wrote that while The Odyssey was uneven and no match for the sure-footedness and intellectual complexity of Oppenheimer, it is elevated by the blindingly charismatic ensemble. And Empire magazine, like The Guardian, gave it 5 out of 5, saying a worthy new translation of an ancient text and yet another monumental piece of work from one of our boldest filmmakers. Watch it on the most colossal screen you can find. In a time of apparent magic, the Greek king Odysseus, played by Matt Damon, has not returned home and disappeared following the Trojan War. After 20 years since departing the city of Ithaca, several suitors, including Antinous, played by Robert Pattinson, are pushing to take over, and in doing so has to marry Odysseus' wife Penelope, played by Anne Hathaway, and plans to remove Odysseus' son, Telemachus, played by Tom Holland, from taking the throne. Only the Queen, her son, and a handful of others believe Odysseus will return. Telemachus needs to find out what happened to his father and travels to Sparta, so the film cuts back and forth from different time periods as we unpick what happened to Odysseus, as his long journey home is fraught with danger and discovery that sends him on a different path as he loses his way. As Telemachus searches for information on his father, Antinous plans to kill Telemachus and plots to take over and plunder Ithaca. I never read the original Odyssey poem by Homer. We didn't study it in class at college, but I was familiar with some of the elements of the story, because it's been referenced so many times over the years in films and TV shows, and the story itself has inspired so many writers over the centuries, so it's remained pretty relevant even to this day. What got me excited about the film was one simple fact. It was directed by Christopher Nolan, who has a fantastic track record. He has written and directed some of the best movies the past 2 decades. He writes very smart action thrillers and loves traditional cinema, which is shooting stuff within camera and on celluloid film. He is a big advocate for IMAX and 70mm, which is the best way to watch a movie. I watched the Odyssey in digital IMAX. Sadly, tickets for the 15 Perth 70mm presentations in London sold out months ago from when I last checked, so it may be some time before I can see it how it was originally intended. But what did I make of the movie? Firstly, I thought it was very good, but I wanted it to be excellent, and it didn't quite get there for me. Let me explain. The performances for the most part are fantastic, though Tom Holland felt miscast. His performance felt very subdued. He didn't make much of an impression. Matt Damon, as always, delivers. I don't think the guy has ever given a bad performance. Anne Hathaway handles the emotional stuff extremely well, as she strongly believes her husband will return and will not be forced to marry someone else. And Robert Pattinson is so good at playing a dickhead. I can't fault their work. The production design was extremely effective in its look. They made use of forced perspective miniatures to extend locations, the classic way of visual effects, as Nolan wanted to ground everything in reality, and it's all very believable. I assume the majority of the big sequences are shot in camera, as a lot is visible in the behind-the-scenes featurettes. So it's happening for real on screen. It's pure cinema at its finest. Of course, CG is used in parts to enhance the scene, but there are no actors standing in front of a blatantly obvious green screen that looks fake every time you see it. The Odyssey all looks natural, like how films used to be made. At 3 hours long, surprisingly, I didn't feel its length. I wasn't compelled to look at my watch out of boredom, so the film kept me engaged to the very end. So why isn't it excellent? I just don't think Christopher Nolan has fun with the fantasy elements and the use of magic. There's a sequence with a giant, which on the one hand is terrifying down to the sound design. There is a moment he screams out in pain. The sound mix just rocked the cinema. Kids would be scared out of their wits if they saw this. Once the soldiers escape and the giant chases after them, the giant is hidden amongst the trees. I wanted to see more of the beast and its size. They escape this whirlpool, and then they are attacked by this tentacle monster that at first looked like elephant trunks, but it's very unclear what you are seeing, and it just disappears into the rock. That was all CGI, and it didn't look that convincing. There is some body horror elements later on as they encounter the witch Circe, which is very effectively done and definitely earns its 15 certificate rating. But saying all that, it does feel like Nolan was holding back in parts, not to go too far to maintain that sense of reality. It doesn't quite hit the mark with the level of excitement that should be gained from a number of big action sequences. I suppose like in a story they arrive somewhere they have never been before, encounter something horrible and just run away. It felt like a Monty Python sketch. With the IMAX format, you go in with certain expectations, and for the most part the Odyssey delivers that. You can see the quality even on a digital IMAX version. That depth of field with the lenses is incredible with its detail, but Nolan is not a strong visualist compared to, say, Ridley Scott. If Ridley Scott in his prime was using IMAX, the end result would blow your socks off. There wasn't really anything in the Odyssey that really blew me away. I'm not saying it didn't look good, far from it, as there were a handful of establishing shots where you'd say that looked impressive, but it didn't floor me. There wasn't this gasping moment of viewing this incredible vista, so it didn't quite get there to meet my expectations of the IMAX format.
A face!
The score by Ludwig Göransson goes in a different direction to what you come to expect from a Hollywood epic. They get rid of the orchestra and make use of unfamiliar sounds to make it timeless. Ludwig had to go out of his comfort zone and find sounds he hadn't worked with before. They found instruments that may have been used at that time or when the Odyssey was written. As the Odyssey is set during the Bronze Age, Nolan wanted to make use of gongs, and for the emotional moments they would make use of vocalists to heighten the scenes. The soundtrack is very effective throughout, haunting and large in its sound. It serves the story very well. Despite not going with a large orchestra, it still retains a wide soundscape thanks to the use of synthesizers. The theme for Penelope has that 80s vibe of Tangerine Dream and Vangelis. It's a clever mix of old and new, but it doesn't sound like a pale imitation of, say, Gladiator. Though with the vocal moments, it does sound like it's nearly going down that path, which made me chuckle, as Ludwig couldn't help himself. There are moments in the score where it doesn't quite hit the epic heights I wanted it to, for me to get that emotional reaction. Vangelis' score to Alexander does that in spades, and there are parts of the score that just incorporate sound effects of things being hit, which aren't interesting to listen to, as they go a bit too experimental for my liking, so I skipped over those tracks. But like his work on Oppenheimer, it's distinctive and very unique. That makes Ludwig a refreshing composer compared to the many forgettable Hans Zimmer knockoff style scores that still plague modern movies. The Odyssey is a fantastic achievement in filmmaking, there's no doubt about that. I don't dispute the quality and craftsmanship of the production. Nolan has that skill to write engaging scripts, and in the case of this adaptation of this ancient story, he has brought new life into it and introduced it to a whole new generation. He is in a very rare position to do what he wants in Hollywood, and to be left alone to make the movies he wants to make, but I just wish he would lighten up a little bit, and have some fun with it, not take things so seriously, as it can sometimes zap out some of the sense of entertainment out of what could have been a potentially exciting fantasy/action moment. It's too early for me to decide if this is his best work. Maybe on second or third viewing I could make such a statement, but at this stage the Odyssey doesn't quite give me that satisfaction of his previous efforts, such as The Dark Knight and Interstellar. The Odyssey ticks off a lot of the boxes to make it a really good movie, but with the hype surrounding it and the use of IMAX cameras for the entire film, it didn't quite hit me with that lasting impression that I'd hoped.
A trick!
Hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to click the like button and hit the bell to be notified of my latest reviews. Big thanks to my patrons and YouTube members for supporting the channel. If you want to get involved and gain access to exclusive videos and take part in Q&As, follow the link below.